Thank you. I really look forward to hearing what you and Luke say. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, so he'll bring his support. Yeah, I've got some support. We got it. Yes, yeah, it is.
Good morning. Good morning to all of you here in Holland and to all of you watching us remotely today on this beautiful Sunday morning, July 17th. Welcome to this service of worship at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tucson. My name is Celeste Rogers, and I am your worship associate today. You are in for a special treat today. We are very fortunate to have with us members of UU Jazz and some of our UU youth with us. I am pleased to introduce you now to Janine Gelsinger, the Executive Director of UU Jazz, the Unitarian Universalist Justice Arizona Network. UU Jazz has a mission of engaging Arizona UUs to live out their values in action. We do this by connecting UU congregations across the state, supporting social justice ministries in congregations, partnering with grassroots organizations working for justice, and changing public policy in our state to reflect our values. Please welcome Janine Gelsinger.
Hi, Tucson. I am so thrilled to be back with you. It's been a minute. I'm so happy to see so many faces that I haven't seen in person in so long, and so many new faces that I'm excited to get to know. Thank you for having us here for this service today. So when we were thinking about what UU Jazz service might be great for Tucson this year, our board had just finished creating value statements. They worked all year to really clarify the values of UU Jazz, and some of those values include following the lead of directly impacted people and centering those who are sometimes at the margins. Now, I could have come and given you a sermon about that, but what better way to do that than actually live it? Which is what we try to do at UU Jazz, right? Live out our values in action. So instead today, we've brought you some incredible UUs. Young adults, queer UUs, BIPOC UUs, disabled UUs, folks who really actually lead our movement. And some of those folks are on our staff team. So I'm gonna do a brief introduction today, and then I'm gonna go away and let the rest of our brilliant leaders lead this service. So I wanna introduce you. You can wave when I say your name to Casey. Casey is on UU Jazz staff as a congregational organizer and as program coordinator for You the Vote for legislative advocacy and climate justice. Casey is also an organizer with Sunrise Movement, locally in Tempe and also at the national level. And, you know, in her free time, is an attorney for voter protection. We also have with us Toy, who is also a congregational organizer with UU Jazz and program coordinator for abolition and immigration justice. Toy also organizes with Shot in the Dark, a harm reduction team in the Phoenix area, and was on the core team for Phoenix Restoration Project, which is a migrant support group. Phoebe is on our UU Jazz staff team. Phoebe's our brand designer and designed this logo and these amazing t-shirts that you see on our team. She was formerly started as an intern and now is the intern program coordinator for our summer internship. And she's studying at the U of A astrophysics. We have some friends with us today as well. Elliot Crary is a lifelong UU, a native to Tucson, and a dear, dear friend of many on this team. When we started planning this service, they said, well, we have to ask Elliot to make sure he's here too. Zoe is also with us today. Now, Zoe lives in Philadelphia, but she holds a role as the network coordinator for UU Young Adults for Climate Justice. And she's here in Tucson this month as a month-long volunteer for No More Deaths. And then finally, I'm really excited to introduce you to our coordinator for this entire worship today. Y'all, we are so lucky to have one of the most in-demand worship leaders in all of Unitarian Universalism here with us today. Karishma Gottfried is a UU Young Adult leader. She's visiting on her summer-long Amtrak trip across the country, where, let me tell you, lots of us were trying to pull her into services across the country. She's also the campus ministry coordinator for Sanctuary Boston, and most recently served as one of the virtual MCs for GA. So if you attended our UUA General Assembly virtually, you probably saw Karishma and Greg making all sorts of amazing TikToks for the rest of us at home. Thank you again for having UU Jazz here. I hope you enjoy this incredible service they've created. And if you are ready to connect more with UU Jazz, we want to hear from you. After the service, we'll be sticking around in the sanctuary where Casey and Toy and I will be leading some conversation. We mostly want to get to know you and what justice issues you're passionate about and connect you a little bit more so we can do some more work together. Thanks again.
Thank you, Janine. Our settled minister, Reverend Bethany Russell Lowe, will return to the pulpit on Sunday, August 7th. In the meantime, your worship associates have planned several exciting services, so I hope that you will tune in, either in person or virtually. Our church community continuously strives to become as varied as the blooms of the Sonoran Desert so that we may better reflect the wonderful diversity with which Southern Arizona is blessed. In whatever way you participate in our service today, we welcome you. For those watching us from afar, wherever and whenever you share in this service, we welcome you. Whatever the cultural or ethnic background that you claim, you are welcome here. Whomever you love, however you identify your gender, and however you choose to express it, we welcome you. Wherever you are on life's journey and your spiritual path, you are welcome here. We are a covenantal community, which means that we make a commitment about how we will interact with one another. In these times of pandemic, wearing masks, practicing social distancing, and getting vaccinated are all part of our covenant with one another. These practices are especially important in order to show compassion for those who are most vulnerable in our community, the youngest and those who are immunocompromised. If you are attending worship in person with us today, our hope is that you are fully vaccinated unless you have a medical exemption from your doctor. If you are unwilling to be vaccinated against COVID-19, you are still welcome to join our worship services, but we ask that you please join virtually only out of consideration for the rest of us. Because the COVID transmission rate in Pima County is now at medium high, congregational singing is not permitted per our UUCT COVID policy. However, when our wonderful singers sing our songs today, you are welcome to hum along, clap, tap, or dance to the music as you so choose. I extend a special welcome today to any visitors participating remotely or in person this morning, and invite you to fill out a guest information card, which Mary Weiss will post in the YouTube chat right now. In Goddard Hall, across the patio, you will find our welcome table, which will be open during social hour after the service. Any new visitors, please stop by the table and fill out your contact information. We are fortunate today to have Alfredo Vasquez as our guest musician, so please give him a warm welcome.
Blessed are you who lead with enthusiasm and confidence.
You will inspire curiosity and hope in others.
Blessed are you who build friendships as well as justice.
Even when you lose an issue, you will have strengthened the foundation of your community.
Blessed are you who take delight in people.
You will not be bored at meetings.
Blessed are you who can question your own assumptions and listen with an open mind.
You will receive new insights beyond your imagining.
Blessed are you who ask for help in your role as leaders.
You will find teachers at every turn, and your work will remain interesting and active.
Blessed are you who sing and dance.
You will find energy and joy to lift you on your journey.
Blessed are you who study the rhythms of history.
You will have the knowledge with which to shape the future.
Blessed are you who discover, train, and encourage young leaders.
You will see your work expand and grow beyond your own time and talent.
Blessed are you who will not let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
You will see progress in your lifetime.
Blessed are you who live from a place of gratitude.
For you will know the meaning of life.
Blessed of you who can change your mind.
You are still alive.
I need the chalice lighting words up there. Okay, good thing. Okay, please join us in our chalice lighting words today. Why We're Here by Eric Walker Wilkstrom. Here today, in this place, and with these people, may we listen so that we can hear. May we hear so that we can feel. May we feel so that we can know. And may we know so that we can change ourselves and this world. May this chalice we light our way. Now, if you have a chalice at home, you may light it as we light our chalice here.
Gonna keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Never turning
I now invite the children or anyone who'd like to join us for the story of all ages. In the 2000s, there was a massive movement across the country where states defined marriage as only between a man and a woman. 31 states passed constitutional amendments banning same-sex marriage. People who believed in equality for all, even likely some of the people in this room, decided to fight back. In California, volunteers went out knocking on doors, talking to people about voting no on Prop 8, creating the largest LGBTQ volunteer effort to that point in time ever. They were encouraged only to come out if it was short and used phrases that began with, "But regardless of how you feel about gay people." They focused on the rights and benefits that come with marriage, and the volunteers glossed over their humanity and kept conversations short. And when the vote came in, they lost. Same-sex marriage was banned in California. The following year in Maine, volunteers went out with even more scripted and impersonal talking points. And when the vote came in, they lost. 53% of voters had voted to ban same-sex marriage, ban folks' ability to marry who they love. So they decided to do something different. Folks in Maine spent 2 years having long-form, values-based conversations with their neighbors. They started talking about their common values, love and commitment, family and connection, and highlighting universal values, such as the golden rule of treating others the way you want to be treated. They practiced genuine curiosity. They focused on their real lived experiences. They knew that sharing is a two-way street. They were open, empathetic, and real about their experiences and relationships. And guess what? When the vote came in, they won. The vote was 53 to 47, flipping the previous vote. When the people connected with people, they changed their hearts and minds.
Our earth is strong. It can hold our pain and our joy, our love and our anger. Our shared bowl, which we use for joys and concerns each week, is strong enough to hold the big rocks, our collective celebrations and mournings, and also the smaller stones that will be added to signify our individual joys and sorrows. There is so much to grieve in the world right now. The ongoing war in Ukraine, the escalating consequences of climate change, gun violence across our nation, the loss of longtime church members. My own family this week learned the devastating news that my youngest niece has terminal cancer and is only expected to live a few weeks. Despite the heartache, I try to remember the world still is full of beauty, the kindness of strangers, the kindness of friends, the beauty of the desert, the blooms, the purple blossoms on the Texas Rangers this week. We who live in the desert know that water is a life-sustaining and scarce resource. Let us remember those who are walking through our desert right now without access to water. We poured water from a plastic jug similar to those used by No More Deaths, and used by those seeking to assure greater assurance to access to water in the desert. If you have a joy or a sorrow to share, I invite you to go to menti.com right now and put in the code 2372-2346. If you are here in person and cannot access the internet, you can go to Brian Moon and he can type in your joy or sorrow for you. If you are here in person, you are also welcome to come up to the table and put a stone into the water to symbolize your joy or sorrow. The pebbles create ripples of hope. Saddened by the recent deaths of two longtime members, Rick Meyer and Jim Feisley. My disabled son is now sitting independently, a joy to share. Glad that I can smell coffee again after experiencing COVID. Missing those who've passed away this year. Joy for all the younger friends who are with us today. We are glad to have you here with us. Thinking of my sister's divorce, holding her and my nephew in light and love. Stressed and excited about both the primaries coming up on August 2nd. Yes. The joy of being in a new yet familiar community. Joyful that you, Jazz, is with us today. A joy for rain and our amazing sunsets, yes. Sorrow for the loss of beloved church members and a young family member. I pray that our daughter finally comes back home after abruptly leaving in January. Yes. I'm happy that healing from my spinal procedure is going better than expected.
Beloveds, let us breathe together. We live in a complicated world. We each come with our individual joys and our individual sorrows. We each come with confusion and calm and stillness and despair and hope. We share what is on our minds and in our hearts in this time together so that your joys become our joys, and your sorrows, our sorrows. Beloveds, let us breathe. Spirit of life, breath that connects us, help us to hold the contradictions of this world. As we breathe together, help us to remember that none of us go it alone. In the name of all that is holy, from galaxies newly visible to us, to the first wail of a baby, from an oasis in a desert, to a hug from a dear friend. Amen. We rise, humbly hearted, rise, won't be divided, rise, with spirit to guide us, rise, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in hope, in prayer, we're right here, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in hope, in prayer, we're right here, we rise, all of the children rise, elders with wisdom rise, ancestors surround us rise, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in hope, in prayer, we're right here, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here, in hope, in prayer, we're right here, we rise, up from the wreckage, rise, with tears and with courage, rise, fighting for life, we rise.
Thank you. If you are proud of this church, become its advocate. If you are concerned for its future, share its message. If its values resonate deep within you, give it a measure of your devotion. This church cannot survive without your faith, your confidence, your enthusiasm, or your resources. The offering will now be generously given and most gratefully received. If you are joining us on live stream, you can send a check to the office, give online at uuctucson.org/donate, or text 833-361-5796. If you are here in person, the offering baskets are by the patio doors, and we have someone here with a basket as well if you want to put your offering there, either here now or on your way out today. Thank you.
The Riot in Ephesus, adapted from the New International Version translation. Thank you. After Jesus was killed, his followers began to travel far and wide, sharing Jesus' teachings of love and justice. Some of them, including the Apostle Paul, made their way to Ephesus, which is in modern-day Turkey. A silversmith named Demetrius, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought in a lot of business for the craftsmen there. One day, he called together the other craftsmen and said, "You know, my friends, that we receive a good income from this business, and you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and in practically the whole province of Asia. He says that gods made by human hands are no gods at all. There is danger not only that our trade will lose its good name, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited." When they heard this, they were furious and began shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." Soon the whole city was in an uproar. The people seized some of Paul's traveling companions, and all of them rushed into the theater together. Paul wanted to appear before the crowd, but the disciples would not let him. The assembly was in confusion. Some were shouting one thing, some another. Most of the people did not even know why they were there. After a few hours of shouting and rioting, the city clerk quieted the crowd and said, "Fellow Ephesians, doesn't all the world know that the city of Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of the great Artemis? You ought to calm down and not do anything rash. We are in danger of being charged with rioting because of what happened today. In that case, we would not be able to account for this commotion, since there is no reason for it." After he said this, he dismissed the assembly.
Good morning. I am so honored to be here with the incredible team of UU Justice Arizona. So I posted on Facebook that I would be traveling via Amtrak through the country this summer, and Janine invited me to Arizona, but I didn't know that I would have the chance to lead a service at your beautiful congregation with an organization that I deeply admire, UU Jazz. On this quick weekend detour through the Southwest on my way to the UU Musicians Conference and Song Leaders Convergence in Michigan, I'm so grateful to be spending this morning with you all here in person and online. Now, I'm not from Arizona, but the ministries of UU Jazz extend far beyond the imaginary, societal, but all too consequential borders of the state. I deeply admire and appreciate the prophetic ways in which UU Jazz helps us all to live our UU values into the world. Your work, our work with UU Jazz, is a part of a long legacy of Unitarian Universalist justice seekers, something we are reminded of every time we light a chalice. Now, I thought growing up that lighting a chalice was something we've been doing for centuries. But actually, the symbol and ritual of lighting a chalice only came around during World War II. During the war, many Unitarians in the United States were very concerned for the well-being of many people living in Eastern Europe, Jews, Unitarians, and many more. And a group came together in Boston to form the Unitarian Service Committee, which is still around to this day. They came up with ways to help people escaping Nazi-occupied places, by passing on messages, finding escape routes, raising money, and working with governments and other organizations for support. But because they were a new organization and didn't have any official paperwork, it was hard to get people to trust them and to get the help that they needed. So they asked an Austrian artist, Hans Deutsch, to create a symbol to put on the service committee papers to help them look official. And he decided to combine a chalice, or a cup, with a flame, representing the healing and holding of community, along with the fire, the spirit of justice. And over the years, Unitarian and Universalist communities all over the world started their worship services by lighting a chalice, something that makes me feel at home no matter where I am. And the fact that this beautiful symbol is inextricably linked to our heritage as justice seekers and risk takers and heretics, well, that makes me even more proud. I want to share with you another piece about our UU heritage. Another prominent Unitarian who was involved in our faith around the time of the Second World War. James Luther Adams, a minister and theologian, visited Germany in 1935. Now, he was expecting to study and hang out with some of the greatest theologians of all time, which he kind of did, but he also had to confront the rise of the Nazi regime. And Adams said that in Nazi Germany, he soon came to the question, what is it in my preaching and my political action that would stop this? It is a liberal attitude to say that we keep ourselves informed and read the best papers on these matters and perhaps join a voluntary association now and then. But to be involved with other people so that it costs, and so that one exposes the evils of society, requires something like conversion, something more than an attitude. It requires a sense that there's something wrong and that I must be different from the way I have been. Different from the way I have been. Now, our reading from the New Testament of the Christian Bible is a story of people learning to be different than the way they have been. One thing I love about our UU congregations is that we all come together on Sunday with such a wide variety of religious backgrounds and beliefs. We draw from many sources, and some of those sources are the Jewish and Christian teachings which call us to love our neighbors as ourselves. Now, I grew up in the UU Fellowship of Corvallis, Oregon, and we're not really the biggest Bible people up there. So it really wasn't until I went off to college and really started studying religion, I'm a religion major, that I'd even heard of the story of the Riot of Ephesus. But what stood out to me the very first time I heard this story was the reaction of the merchants of Ephesus when their ways of profit and exploitation were challenged. So backing up a little to give the story some more context, this Bible passage comes from the book of Acts, which is attributed to the same author as the Gospel of Luke and written around the turn of the 2nd century, so roughly around 100 CE. And our passage today from Acts 19 takes place in about 55 CE in the Greek city of Ephesus, located in modern-day Turkey. Ephesus is featured prominently in the New Testament. It's the second most mentioned city after Jerusalem and home to about 200,000 people. So when Paul comes to Ephesus in 53 or 54 CE, it's a pretty big deal. And he's going around and sharing the teachings of Jesus, and more people are joining what is then called the Way, early Christianity. And as the Jesus movement grows in Ephesus, predictably, it begins to disrupt the way things are. And you can imagine that there are some people for whom change is not a good thing. And a little more background on Ephesus itself, it's the home and center of the cult of Artemis. And as you can see from this passage, the Ephesians were big fans of Artemis. The original temple of Artemis was built in Ephesus in the 6th century BCE, and then rebuilt after it was burned down in the mid-3rd century BCE. The Greek poet Antipater ranked it as one of the 7 wonders of the world. And while Luke doesn't mention any visits to the temple from Paul, it was certain that Paul would have been aware of the temple and its prophets. The claim he makes that the gods made with hands are not gods is a reference to the souvenir shrines that silversmiths made and sold for the visitors to the temple to purchase. The silversmith trade is a very lucrative trade in Ephesus, as people come from far and wide to pray to the goddess. So you can imagine, as Paul is in Ephesus, dismissing Artemis and other gods as idolatry, and preaching the way of Jesus, the silversmiths would not be too happy about that. And sure enough, one day a business tycoon named Demetrius gathers the artisans together in Ephesus, and he tells them, Men, you know that we get our wealth from this business. You also see and hear that not only in Ephesus, but in almost the whole of Asia, this Paul has persuaded and drawn away from a considerable number of people, saying that the gods made with hands are not gods. And there is danger, not only that this trade of ours may come into disrepute, but also the temple of the great goddess of Artemis will be scorned, and she will be deprived of her majesty that brought all Asia and the world to worship her. So there are three issues that this Demetrius raises. Not only is this a personal economic concern for these businessmen, it's also a social and religious concern. The worship of Artemis is what keeps not only the city of Ephesus, but the people from all over Asia and the world united together. Paul is not just a small nuisance who is claiming all of these preposterous things about Jesus. He has become a larger social force that is a threat to the way things have been. Demetrius recognizes this and begins to sound the alarm bells. And as the mob mentality kicks in, the other people begin to grow angry. Conveniently, there's this huge theater in Ephesus, and the artisans rush down the street and gather the people in this theater. Now, this isn't your modern-day movie theater, it's more like a Super Bowl stadium. Paul gets wind of this, and some of his companions are dragged into the theater with the crowd. And Paul wants to go, but the other disciples are telling him not to go, so he stays far away from the theater, which is probably a good idea. Now, I could tell you more about the riot itself, but it's actually not that interesting. The crowd is rioting around for a few hours, and they begin to settle down. The town clerk pleads with them to disperse and pursue justice through the courts instead of the streets. And Paul, who's not actually present for any of this, ends up leaving Ephesus soon after. So this riot takes place in the mid-1st century and is recorded in Acts all around 50 years later. The writer of the book of Acts was almost certainly not present at the riot, but rather heard about it. And as he says at the beginning of Luke, I too decided, after investigating everything from the very first, to write an orderly account. But the question remains, why? Why did Luke decide to include this story in the book of Acts, a book intended to share the development of the early Christian church and its spread throughout the Roman Empire? To answer this question, we must first examine the context of this story, the outcome of the situation itself, and its modern implications in a world where riots, both for and against the status quo, take place on a daily basis. Luke is writing Acts for an audience of 1st and 2nd century citizens of Ephesus and Roman Asia. While not recording an event that happened in the lifetimes of the majority of his audience, the riot of Ephesus took place only in the recent past. Now, let's be clear on one thing. The Christianity of today and the Christianity of Paul, and even of Luke, are two very different things. As Paul and his other disciples travel around the world proclaiming the word of Jesus, they are still by far in the minority. It is not for another century or so that Christianity really gains its place in the world, and it is certainly not the global force that it is today. There have been no crusades, there has been no colonization of the Americas, although there have certainly been other forms of colonization, and Christians still have very little political power. After all, the memory of Jesus' crucifixion still hangs in his followers' hearts and minds. And when I talk about the way that Paul's teachings in the gospel of Jesus impact this community and draw connections to the way we can disrupt systems in modern times, I remain focused on the nonviolent and anti-oppressive ways that these apostles shared their beliefs about the teachings of Jesus through Ephesus, and not the later developments of imperial Christianity, which have been used to oppress and colonize communities all over the world. Just so we're clear on that. But what is the point of including this story? If we look at archaeological evidence, there's proof that this riot did occur, but also that the silversmiths were in no real danger of losing their hold on Ephesian society for at least another century. Although Demetrius claims that Paul's teachings will lead to danger and destruction, it was really less about the economic impact of the Jesus movement, but rather a threat to the way of life that Demetrius and the other businessmen were used to. They used the excuse that the temple of the great goddess Artemis would be scorned, but didn't really include much of an argument to back that up. Indeed, Luke says twice in describing the crowd and the gathering in the theater that the city was filled with confusion, and the assembly was in confusion, and most of them did not even know why they had come together. The fear-mongering and misinformation that Demetrius spread is a common reaction when people begin realizing that they must be different from the way they have been and begin to organize against the status quo. Over the past year, there's been coverage of workers around the United States protesting their working conditions and organizing for better treatment. From Kellogg's to Amazon to Starbucks, workers have been forming unions, coordinating strikes, calling for boycotts and boycotts of various products. Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, along with Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos and Kellogg's CEO Steve Cahillane, have generally not been supportive of these efforts, despite making enormous amounts of profit off of the backs of their underpaid and mistreated workers. And as they call for the end to strikes and union organizing, the CEO's arguments against their workers ring as hollow as Demetrius's complaints against Paul. Schultz repeatedly asked a barista and union organizer, "If you hate Starbucks so much, why don't you go somewhere else?" Now, the Starbucks unions are actually somewhat personal to me. I worked at Starbucks for about a year across my last semester of high school and my first year of college. And in that time, I worked for 2 stores in Oregon and Massachusetts, under 5 different managers in total over less than a year. I steamed milk, ground coffee beans, served breakfast sandwiches, and cleaned toilets. I woke up at 3 a.m. for my 4:30 opening shift before going to my late morning classes, my last semester of high school. I stayed up until midnight, scrubbing the floors clean of all the sticky substances that you don't want to know that had accumulated over the course of the day. I served frappuccinos to middle schoolers, straight black coffee, and a muffin to the man who came in every morning and read the paper. Too many espresso shots to count to the college student who always had her nose buried in a book. I'm lucky that I didn't work there because I needed to, but rather I wanted to. I had the privilege of putting my hard-earned minimum wage right into my savings account and kept the few dollars in tips I made for going out on the weekends. But my coworkers, who included the veteran putting himself through college, the single mother who I traded shifts with when she couldn't find childcare, and the older woman who had been working at the same store for a decade, didn't have the luxury. The meager $11 an hour we made could barely buy the breakfast sandwiches and lattes that we sold, much less cover tuition, rent, or groceries. Our minimum wage jobs were a joke compared to the $4.3 billion annual income of our CEO. But now over 100 Starbucks cafes have unionized. Yeah, we can stop to that. It has taken a lot of risk and hard work. Maybe it would have been easier if they just kept their heads down and served the coffee. But they realized that they must be different from the way they had been. The president of our UU Association of Congregations, the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, known dearly to many in Arizona, has told us time and time again that this is not the time for a casual faith. As the world continues to settle and deepen into structures of authoritarian power and violence, as legislators continue to regulate things they aren't supposed to, like bodies, and deregulate things they are, like guns, as days with temperatures like today become more common and widespread, we must be different from the way we have been. State and regional organizations like UU Jazz, our National Side with Love and UU The Vote campaigns, and places like the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, still fighting to empower and liberate, are the bedrock of our movement as the religious left. History will forever and always continue to repeat itself. As the community organizers and justice seekers of the world pursue new paths to liberation and salvation, there will always be those who oppose us, rioting and union-busting their way across time in a desperate attempt to preserve the status quo. The riot of Ephesus is included in the New Testament to demonstrate the persistence of the Jesus movement against its opposition. whether that be from power-hungry government officials, corrupt religious leaders, or greedy local businessmen. What I love about our faith, and I hope you love too, is that we draw on so many prophetic voices to inform the way we move about in the world. It's not where the word universalist in our name comes from, but our belief in universal love most certainly has an impact on the way we draw wisdom from all of the world's religions, from nature and art and science and beyond. Our faith is centered around the radical ideas of love, justice, and compassion that so many prophetic people preach. Jesus taught those things, and James Luther Adams taught those things, and so do we today. And more important than just teaching about love and justice and compassion is that we act on them. The world is always changing. As Octavia Butler says, God is change. The only lasting truth is change. If change is coming, what do we need to imagine? We know we must be different from the way we have been.
Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? 'Cause I know from brokenness there's hope. I know from brokenness there's hope. Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? To be prepared. I know I'm scared to be prepared. I know I'm scared, and I know from brokenness there's hope. I know from brokenness there's hope. Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? I know from brokenness there's hope. I know. Yes, from brokenness there's hope. And I know change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? 'Cause I know from brokenness there's hope. I know from brokenness there's hope. Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change
May You Be Changed by Emily Richards. May you leave this time together changed. May the promises you have made to yourself about who you want to be feel closer to the reality of who you are right now. May you share that feeling of transformation wherever you go. May it spread into every word, deed, thought, and interaction until we are all changed, transformed, and transforming together, becoming our better selves.
You all get to participate in our chalice extinguishing. So when it says congregation left, that will be over here, my right, and congregation right. Okay, this is the message of our faith. This is the meaning of our chalice flame. May it empower our hearts until we are together again.
Yeah.